Yeah, Mr. Bazza, sorry, I'll just stop you there. If you could just stay with us because we're going to go live now to Cairo to our correspondent hassan+ghani on the scene there. Hassan, tell us what's taking place. The latest that we've been hearing is that the son of Nasser, the iconic leader of Egypt, has also joined protests now. What's happening in Tahrir Square?
Yes, there are many political figures in Tahrir Square. There's still a huge number of people there. As we saw earlier today, there's helicopters still hovering above. People are making speeches at that time, and they've actually set up proper stages to address the crowds. There's also music being played. It's a kind of a carnival atmosphere. There is a huge number of people here, and we know the government is taking notice of them because on state TV today we've had several attempts at appeasing the protesters. The first was by the vice president, who talked about constitutional reform and the changes to the legislation in order to make it more progressive, better for the people. We've had the Interior Ministry paraded on television talking about neighbourhood policing and so on. And we've had the Prime Minister also talking about the priorities of the new government. That doesn't seem to have had any effect on the protesters here so far. There's also been a pro-Mubarak protest. I keep mentioning this just for the sake of balance, but that protest has swelled relatively from maybe 200 people earlier today to 600 people, and that's in comparison to the million-plus people in Tahrir Square who want the regime of Hosni Mubarak to be brought down. Their demands are very simple. They want security, safety, freedom to express their protest. They want dignity, human rights and social justice. One of the main things that's driving a lot of the families that are here in Tahrir Square is the poverty. 40% of the Egyptian public live in poverty. There's very high unemployment here and so on. And so for them, this protest is really their only hope of a better life. Also, there have been reports that the US envoy, now I can't confirm this, but there have been some reports that the US envoy to Egypt, who was sent yesterday, is actually currently in talks with Hosni Mubarak about his imminent departure. I can't confirm this, but this is what I have been told. In fact, there are some even more speculative rumors that Hosni Mubarak has actually departed from the country, but we've heard that before, so I wouldn't necessarily put too much stock in that. But there are some rumors that he's gone to Bahrain, but I'd say that's probably a bit premature at this moment.
Well, from the scene behind you, it has become dark now there in Cairo where you are, but it seems that, as you said scenes of like a carnival taking place there and music playing and people still on the streets, so presumably they are going to stay on the streets. What has the army been doing? What's the role of the military forces right now there?
The military yesterday were actually very strict in enforcing the curfew, which now begins at 3 p.m. In Cairo. But today I've actually seen that in the street behind me there used to be a checkpoint right here with several soldiers manning that checkpoint, preventing people from coming in and out, especially people with cameras. Today that checkpoint has disappeared, and the movement around this area, around Tahrir Square, seems to be relatively free, and I believe that's because of the sheer numbers they were faced with today. They were overwhelmed, and they didn't see any point in trying to stop people from moving around anymore because the protest actually swelled out of the area where they had set up their entry points in there. They've been providing security for the protesters. Earlier on I mentioned that there was a report from various sources that the army stopped a car and had found weapons in that car and ex-security personnel heading towards the protest. Now I can't understand why that would be the case, other than to cause panic, chaos and fear on the streets of Cairo and to create a situation where violence would take place. Now the protesters are very keen that this remains peaceful. They've already lost 150 lives. Some NGOs here are saying that that number actually may in reality be closer to 300 once the chaos, the dust settles and real stock is taken of the damage that's been done by the security forces to the protesters, to the people who have been calling for the regime to be brought down. We saw those very violent images on Friday. So they don't want to report a repeat, of those scenes, and they've been checking everybody, including myself, going into the protest several times to make sure that nobody is carrying any weapons. And I don't know if you can hear the army helicopters, the military helicopters, still patrolling the skies, keeping an eye on the situation and keeping an eye on Tahrir Square.
Yeah, and we have heard that internet lines and cell phone lines have been cut. I wonder if those restrictions are still in place and how they're affecting the flow of information from Egypt.
It's been interesting today because the phone lines were up yesterday, they were up this morning, and then during the day they kind of went down. They seem to be back up now. The internet came on for a few hours today, but then it went back down again. It seems quite sporadic, but it's better than it was yesterday when the internet was completely dead. So I'm not sure what's going on, what orders the government is issuing to internet service providers and to telecommunications companies, and whether those orders are being ignored now, that those companies can see that the government is really losing control of the situation and the protesters have the upper hand. I'm not sure what is the case, but for example in this studio I saw the internet was working just a couple of hours ago. I don't know whether that's still the case. I'll go and check after this live, but it's been very sporadic. The government still seems to be keen to stop people from posting their videos on YouTube and so on of what's going on, perhaps just in case things do turn violent again. We know that the army and the police have set up heavy security around the presidential palace, and we know a lot of people wanted to march there, especially from Tahrir Square today. That didn't happen in the end, although I believe a small number of people did end up getting there, but that didn't happen in the end, and perhaps they were expecting violence and they didn't want those pictures to get out.
And Hassan, well, practically all forms of normal life are on a standstill there in Cairo where you are, and somebody here asking as well, how long can these people stay on the streets? First of all, how do they meet their needs? I mean, food and water, and nobody's going to work. I don't think that maybe a lot of shops are open right now because of the security situation. Tell us more on that.
Yes, generally life has come to a standstill. Shops are closed, the banks, the ATMs ran out of money a long time ago, and the banks have still been shut. The stock exchange is still shut. We know the Egyptian economy is losing a lot of money. Tourism, which is a big earner for the Egyptian economy, has completely collapsed. But you know, I look at these people, they don't seem to care because they've had 30 years of dictatorship, and they know that this is their only opportunity now to be rid of that and for a better future. And I asked them, you know, how long are you willing to do this? And they said, we're ready to do it for as long as it takes, because this is our only opportunity, and a few days or even a few weeks of hardship is worth it if we can provide a better future for our children. And as I said, a lot of parents there bringing their children there because they believe this is the only way to provide a better future for their children. But generally, yes, life is a bit difficult here for the average person. People aren't getting their salaries, which they should have got at the end of the month. But in Tahrir Square, ironically, you can get free food there. There's people handing out free food, free water, drinks. The shops in that area have reduced their prices in support of the protests, some of them even handing out free food as well. So it's a kind of a social movement as well as a political one that's forming here, and everybody is helping everyone else.
All right, Press TV's Hassan+Ghani joining us there live from Cairo. Hassan, thanks very much for that update. We'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. But now I'd like to go to London. Our correspondent Farina Alam joining us from a rally